Hi. Oh, it's working, okay. You have like 2 minutes, you don't have to be quiet. Now it's like awkwardly quiet here. Actually, I'm gonna make use of those 2 minutes for a quick announcement. There is a mistake in the program, and there's two other names there. Obviously, those names are just as weird as my name because these are two other Israeli names. I was supposed to give, originally I was supposed to give a different talk here with my two other coworkers from Tel Aviv, Israel, about an extortion attack on one of our customers. But since there is a federal investigation on it, in a different country, it's not in the US, they asked us nicely to delay this talk and not do it so that we won't hurt the investigation. So instead, you're stuck with just one Israeli guy doing this bullshit. They got the description of the talk right, but the name's wrong. So if you were expecting to see two other idiots, instead you're stuck with just one. But 3 times the fun. Oh yeah. I strive for excellence. Yeah, I had like a triple espresso and a Gatorade. I hope I won't have to run to the restroom during the talk. I've had about like 20 minutes of sleep in the past 2 weeks, so this is going to be great. Okay, awesome. Hello, everyone. It's so great to see all of you. Like, I'm honored to be here again at Derbycon. Oh, crap. Honored to be here again at Derbycon. I was here speaking last year. It was great. Really super happy to be here again. Lots of slides, lots of dumb shit to go through. So let's start by the obligatory who am I, and I'm going to go over it real quick. Shalom lekulam. My name is Amit. As my weird name states, I'm originally from Israel. I moved to Boston 2 years ago. So I'm trying to change my accent from something like this to something like this fucking garbage kid. Move your garbage car. So I am the head of security research at Cybereason Nocturnus, which is our new services operation that we're building. Before that, I've been with Cybereason for 4 years. Before that, I used to do nation-state acting sort of shit. And now I am a very, very well documented US immigrant as of a few months ago. So, oh, wow. So weird getting applauded for like successfully getting a green card. These are such weird times. I do a lot of low-level research. I find exploits in dumb shit, if you've been to my talk last year, and I do a lot of malware reverse engineering, and I post a lot of dumb stuff on Twitter. This is my handle. You're more than welcome to heckle me over there. Also, please check out our awesome podcast. It really is one of the best podcasts in the world, produced by my really long-time good friend and coworker, Eliad. Raise your hand, wave. This is very embarrassing for him, and yeah. Okay, so I'm done with the announcements. So quick history lesson. So what are we exactly doing here? So back in 2016, I discovered OS X Spirit, which is very, very aggressive Mac adware, and since I don't believe in adware, adware is malware. I keep saying that, so if you are using the term adware, please say malware because they're exactly the same thing. I discovered this completely by chance. I was on IRC one night, and this guy came in to the channel and said, hey, my computer is acting super weird and slow. I don't know what it is. I asked him for some samples and files, and I got into this insane rabbit hole for like about 2 months. I completely tore this thing apart, and because of the fact that the authors fucked up, because they have great OPSEC, awesome, so I'm going to have to deal with this. Because of their great OPSEC, they actually left their names in one of the payloads that they dropped. I used a very elaborate open source technology that is called LinkedIn. I looked for their names, and I found that they're working for an Israeli company called Targeting Edge. There were 2 names there. One of those names was their VP R&D. The other guy was one of their devs. We're going to talk about that later. I posted some articles, did some talks, and once everything got public, their servers went down, and I thought I was done with this. Then, around last year, around end of last year, November, some new samples started showing up, and all of my Yara rules started lighting up like a Christmas tree again. And before, as I said, I do a lot of shit posting. I just put a screenshot on Twitter, and I said, let's see if I can zoom in. Oh, it looks awful. So this is where their names were originally in one of the payloads in the permission table. But instead of their names, this thing now says Batman. Yeah, so I also found out that they watched my talks and they read my papers, because every time I said something like, they should have done that, they should have done this, they actually implemented that. So that was really awesome to see. And after I posted this, like about a day later, we started getting like serious letters from their attorneys. They were very, very personal against me, as you can see. In addition, Mr. Serper, blah, 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 blah. They basically called me a cyber security expert, which I honestly agree with the quotes there. Look at my shirt, for fuck's sake. Yeah, and they said that adware is explicitly not malware. And they sent us a letter literally every day because they try to keep us from posting that research. And at one time, they just started bombarding us with letters, 1 letter a day, 2 letters a day, 3 letters a day, just to keep us from publishing. And they kept insisting that the product does not, nor does it attempt to exploit any device's vulnerability, and it was developed and distributed in functions according to Apple's guidelines. This is like absolutely bullshit, and we're going to see that. Basically, they're saying, we're not doing anything wrong, everything is kosher. And they also said, because I kept saying, and I already proved it 2 years ago when I fucking found their names in there. They said, we have nothing to do with this, this is not us, we have no relation to the Pirate software, this is all bullshit, and they said Mr. Serper is wrong. Okay, we're gonna talk about this as well. So they also said, this is how ESET, the AV vendor, defines malware, and just posted all of those criteria over there. And it's so funny because actually their product answers to each one of those definitions, as we're going to see. So again, there's no such thing as adware, it's just malware with a legal department. So with that, let's revisit this entire insanity. The funniest thing was that they said, if you are going to publish your research, because they realized that we don't give a flying fuck and we don't owe them anything. By the way, they're in Israel. Our company, although that our R&D is in Israel and we have a lot of Israelis, hey, look at me, and the founders are Israeli, the company is headquartered in Boston. So when they're sending us threat letters from Israel, they can just keep sending them because it doesn't mean shit. They said, if you are going to publish your research and you are going public with it, you must, as if we owe them anything, include this blurb that they sent us in your research paper because we want to defend ourselves. Now, let me make this absolutely clear. We don't owe them shit and we don't need to put it anywhere. But it is so fucking ridiculous that I insisted on including this. So I don't have a lot of time and it's a lot of slides. So if you ingested this lovely thing already, so good for you. If not, it's all in our blog anyways. So they kept insisting that everything is kosher and that they're operating according to all the guidelines and everything. But the thing is that if everything is kosher, where is their EULA? Where is their end user's license agreement? I personally went through dozens of different installers and samples and pieces of code. No. Hold on. Oh, Jesus fucking Christ. Okay. Oh, I love it when it's warm. It's great. Oh, shit.
I heard you only had 20 minutes of sleep. So.
Yeah. Cheers, man. Wow, it's so gross. Every fucking year. Okay. Yeah, great. So if everything is kosher, where is the end user license agreement? Because I went through literally like hundreds or dozens of different files and samples, and there's nothing, absolutely nothing. I went to their website, there's nothing on their website. And the coolest thing is that their website has a contact form that sends them an email, and the email doesn't work, as reporter Zach Whitaker, back then at ZDNet, now at TechCrunch, showed me. He sent them an email. Hey there, reaching out for a comment regarding a new report written by Cybereason, blah, 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 blah. And he literally just got an error from their server. This address doesn't exist. Great. So at this point, I'm like, this is fucking Mickey Mouse shit. Like, what am I doing here? So before we get technical, I need to tell you really quick about Mac installers and how adware on Mac works. So when you're installing software on Mac, you have several ways of installing software. One of them is using macOS's own packaging system and installer system, and that system has a really cool feature that's called a pre-flight script. Now, a pre-flight script is often found in a lot of adware installers, and a pre-flight script actually executes the moment you double-click the installer. So even if the installer has an end-user license agreement and everything is awesome, all of their crap is actually executed before you're reading the end-user license agreement. So these guys can basically go fuck themselves. It's very personal, as you can see. Back to November of 2017. So when I started looking at those new samples, I got those samples, obviously, after they were already executed. So I looked at this pre-flight script, and the pre-flight script is sending an HTTP request to their server, and every time that the installer is running, it's generating an ID. Sorry, not when it's running, when it's being downloaded. When it's being downloaded, the installer has an ID. Let's call it like an infection ID. Oh, Jesus Christ. This is so bad. One sip and you're like destroyed. So once this, once this ID is generated, this installer will only work once because this is like a GUID and it only works one time. So obviously, I already got all of those samples after they were executed and installed. So when I ran the installer, nothing happens because the HTTP request was sent to get the file, and then the server told me invalid session, like I can't do anything. So what I do in my life pretty much all the time is I have this motto: when everything fails, apply fuckery. So what I did is I took that URL, and instead of sending it an ID, because I can't generate an ID, I am not smart enough to do math, I said, really? One guy giggles. So I'm not smart enough to do math, so I said, I wonder what's going to happen if instead of sending an ID, I'll just put a single quote in there. Literally the first thing I did. So I sent this request, and then the service sends me a URL that looks like this. I'm like, I wonder what's going to happen if I'm going to request that URL. And like, I'm waiting. And I get this like giant installation script. I'm like, yay, it works. So this script is gigantic, and if you look at it, I'll zoom in. You can see here, it's doing a lot of things as root. Like it's able to run stuff with sudo, right? And the reason for that is that every time you are running a Mac installer, and if any of you are using Mac, you probably know this, it asks for your password because it needs to make changes and it needs to install stuff. Now, the way that those things work is, I mean, by default, on Mac, just like Ubuntu and other Linux distributions, root has no password, and the user can sudo into root with their own password. So once you are inputting your password legitimately, completely legitimately, into that installer, anything there has your password, and anything can run as root. So no privilege escalation exploits, just literally using the system's features. So this huge script is being downloaded. It has like 329 lines. It's written in Bash. It's everything like with comments, and it's pretty awful. Now, I compared the script that I downloaded, that I got from 2 years ago, and this installation script. They were like 99% identical. The only difference was the URL to the servers. Jesus Christ. One sip. Oh. Now, the servers that, the addresses of the servers that were there had DGA addresses. Show of limbs, any of you know what a DGA address is? Okay, cool. So I'll just say it for the people that don't know. A DGA address is basically a way for malware authors to register domains all the time because there is an algorithm that generates domain name, and this algorithm exists in the malware, and it also exists in the author's head. So that way, they can register one domain, and if someone blocks that domain, the algorithm that's in the software will always try to reach the next domain in the list using that algorithm. So that way, if one domain gets blocked, the author can register the next domain on the list according to that algorithm, and so on and so forth, and that's how they can rotate. Those domains usually look very, very random, and I'll show you. It's like a cat is walking on the keyboard just mashing random keys. I'm a cat guy. And this script has had many URLs just like this. Now, the way that OS X Spirit works, it downloads a lot of payloads. It's like those Russian Matryoshka dolls where you open the doll and there's a smaller one inside, and you open this one and there's another one inside of it, and so on. So this is how they operate, and this is going to give you a giant fucking headache. Imagine my situation. So let's start looking at what happens over there. So once the script gets downloaded and executed, it's generating random words. And the reason that it's generating random words is that it's using those randomly generated words to create all sorts of directories and autoruns on your Mac. And the reasons that they're generating different words on each installment of this malware is so that no two installation would look the same. So if my computer was infected, I will have a bunch of like directories with a certain word, and if someone else's computer was infected, they will have the same thing, only with different words. So I won't be able to produce an IOC that says, look for this directory, because it will simply be different on each machine. The way that they're doing it, and this is straight from their script, they have a function that's called RND, stands probably for random, and it's just gets a random word from /usr/share/dict/words that exists. It's just a file with a bunch of dictionary words, exists on every Mac. And it just gets a random word for them, puts it in a variable. That's it. Once they have a random word selected, and they're starting to create the directories and the autoruns, they are contacting their servers and grabbing your machine's UUID. So every Mac has a unique identifier. They grab that unique identifier and send it back to them and say, okay, I have created this random word on this machine, identified by your machine's ID. They send it back to their servers. You can see here, this is the DGA-looking domain. Very legit, right? And they just use curl to send basically a message back to targeting edge saying, okay, I generated this word, I installed it on this machine, and everything works. And again, they said they're not collecting any information, blah, blah, blah. And of course, this is fucking horrible. Now, once this data was submitted, another payload will be downloaded and installed, and a launch agent, which is in Mac speak, that's like one of the ways to create autoruns. A launch agent will be created. The launch agent will have this randomly generated word we've seen before. Jesus Christ. This is so bad. Along with the file that's being downloaded, there is one binary file over there that's called updater. Now, if we look at the functions in updater, which is, again, it's a binary executable. This is a tool called JTool, written by Jonathan Levin, an awesome guy and a really good friend of mine. We can look at the function and we can see that there is a class that's called updater communication, and it has a lot of functions like start update, connection, did receive, response, and all of that. And it also has a function that's called run external application. And when I saw that, I was like, that's very interesting, because if everything they were doing until now is just installing like shit on your computer and for ad purposes, why do they need to run external applications? So I went and reverse engineered this with IDA Pro, and as you can see, I went and looked at this function, and we can actually see that it's calling an API call on macOS. It's called NSTask. It's an Objective-C call, which is basically like using system in standard C. So it will execute a shell command on the behalf of this program. So we can see that it's calling NSTask, and then it's calling /bin/sh, and it accepts a parameter right here. So this is now not just shitty adware, it's actually sort of a rat, which they said that they did not do. Now, another interesting thing about this file, and this is actually something really cool, and it was a mystery that was solved yesterday by Josh Pitts, who sits right here on his talk in Derbycon. The file was signed, but it wasn't signed as like a regular file. So 2 years ago, they had files that were signed with legitimate code signing signatures. And in case you don't know, in Apple world, in order to get a certificate to sign your file, all you need is $99 and a good excuse. Not really even a good excuse, just like, hey, I need a code signing certificate. Here's money, because it's Apple. This time, those files weren't signed in a normal way. They were signed with an ad hoc signature. Now, back then, I didn't even look at the file. I didn't check if it's a fat binary or all of those stuff. I just saw that it's ad hoc signed, and I said, interesting, because this is probably a trick to throw off AVs, because they check if the file is signed. Maybe they don't even check if the signature is valid. Because if you sign something with an ad hoc certificate, you usually do that when you're developing an iPhone app. And the component that checks for that ad hoc signature doesn't really exist in macOS, it only exists on iOS. But yesterday, Josh actually mentioned this in his talk, and this is actually a way to throw off and exploit this whole mechanism of code signature checking. I will not go too deep into this, but this is a slide provided to me by him, so thanks again, Josh. Mac has something that's called fat binaries, where you basically, it was created, I think, originally when Apple started running Macs on Intel CPUs. And their old architecture was PowerPC, so they wanted to compile a single binary that could run on several architectures. So basically, you have one binary that is divided. So you have like, hey, this is a binary, and this is the i386 portion of it, and this is the 64. So this is 32 bits, and there is another binary that can run on 64-bit architecture shoved in there. So basically, if you sign just one of them with an ad hoc certificate, you can circumvent this whole signature checking. So they were exploiting this thing, which is kind of cool. And thanks again, Josh, for helping me figuring this out. So yes, they were actually trying to circumvent AVs. Now, once this updater binary executes, it also enumerates the list of running processes. And the reason that they're doing that is they want to see which browser you're using, because they want to plant and cram all the crap in your browser. So they're enumerating which browsers you're running, and then according to what they see, they're downloading the appropriate ad packages, they refer to it in their code, to your browser of choice. They're also making sure, by the way, that everything is up to date, and they have watchdogs and ways to make sure that they're still updated and that no one removed their plugins and so on, and we'll get into it. I'm going really fast because there's lots of slides. Once this binary was executed, it creates a launch agent, again, an autorun in MacSpeak. And you can see here, this is the name, this is the random word that was generated, roadless. So on my machine it was roadless, on a different machine it would be something else. And this makes sure that this updater file is always running when you start your machine, and that you always get ads. And the parent malware that you have in your machine is always updated. And now we have some more payloads. So another thing that's being dropped in your machine is a tar.gz archive. And if you extract this tar.gz archive, you get a list of files. You can see them all here. There's something that's called browser enhancer, which is an executable. There's a script that's called install updater. There's a file that's called names.db. There's something that's called protector, and there's something that's called updater. Now, I saw that thing protector, and I was like, protector? That looks shady. So protector is a binary file that actually makes sure that you're not removing their software from your machine. And if you are removing it from your machine, it'll make sure that this crap will be installed again. And it also sets up another launch daemon, with a random name. However, this time, instead of generating the random names from a list of words like I've shown you before, there's actually this file names.db. It has a bunch of strings in it. It takes a few strings from this names.db file, crams them together, and creates a random name. And this is Protectors and Updaters installation script. As you can see, it's removing a browser plugin that's called OmniKey. The cool thing, and I looked into it, I said, why are they removing, and OmniKey is a Safari extension. Why are they removing it? So apparently, OmniKey screws up with their shady stuff. So if you use OmniKey, and OmniKey is a plugin, you know how in Chrome you can type Amazon, hit tab, and then you can write your keyword on the address bar and hit enter, and then it will search Amazon? So OmniKey does that for Safari. But that screws up with Parrot because it hijacks your search provider, as I'll show you. So they straight up just remove it without even asking you. But as you know, they said, like, we're not doing anything like this, but here they are. And another interesting thing, when I started looking into it originally 2 years ago, I said, I mean, we call it OS X Spirit as researchers, but what is their internal name? Like, you know, the developers come to work every day and they have their product meetings and everything. What is the internal name of that project? And apparently, everything is logged, as you can see, and it's called Da Vinci. So that's why I called the talk the Da Vinci Code, because it's a shitty pun and I just had to do it. Yeah, so let's look at browser enhancer, and let's take in this great GIF. I love it. In previous versions of OS X Spirit from 2 years ago, I showed, and again, it's all on YouTube, and you can actually read the report on osxspirit.tinyurl.com. I showed that all of their binaries were developed using the Qt framework, which is a framework that allows you to do some cross-platform development. And then again, we see that Browser Enhancer is using Qt again. Now, this on its own is not a lot of proof because a lot of people use Qt, like IDA uses Qt. But that, with the identical scripts and with everything else that I'll show you, again, proves that it's still them and they're the people that are behind it, even though that they're saying that they're not. Now, Browser Enhancer will look for browsers in order to change their settings, because again, their whole point is hijacking your browsing experience. So it will enumerate and search for the following browsers: Firefox, Safari, Chrome, and Microsoft Internet Explorer on a Mac. Now, every time I give this talk, there's always one smartass in the audience that says, well, but there is Microsoft Internet Explorer for a Mac. And then I say, yes, there was one 10 years ago, and it doesn't exist anymore. And then the same person says, well, you can run it with Wine. But it's not. It's not that. They're like legitimately looking for Microsoft Internet Explorer. It's not Wine, like native Microsoft Internet Explorer. And when you, oh my God. And the proof is that in this binary that was compiled for macOS, they are actually looking for registry keys, which is something that they did in previous versions. Again, it's not them. Until this very day, I have no idea how this compiled, but okay. So once Browser Enhancer is executed, the browsers will restart because they have to reload themselves and deploy all of the crap that was crammed into them. And those features that are now implemented in your browser by Targeting Edge are a lot of ways to display ads and and basically track your cookies and plant cookies in your browsing, in your browser, and hijack your search page, and do a lot of really, really nasty stuff. Now, if we look at one of those scripts here, we can see that they're executing OSA script. OsaScript is the AppleScript interpreter. AppleScript is a really nifty language. It was created by Apple. Its syntax is almost like plain English, and you can do a lot of stuff with AppleScript. Now, AppleScript's purpose was to automate tasks. Like if you are editing a lot of photos and you want to do the same thing for a bunch of photos, like let's say applying a frame to a bunch of photos in Photoshop. You can use AppleScript to do that because according to Apple's official guidelines, they are recommending that if you're developing an app for macOS, you want to create an API for AppleScript. So you can do something like tell application Firefox to launch, like run this command and Firefox will launch. You can do a lot of cool stuff, like tell application something to I don't remember exactly the command, to do shell or run shell or something like that, and then you can make other programs launch other processes, which is kind of cool, and a lot of red teamers are using it. So we'll get back to AppleScript, because this is basically code injection without code injection, and this is a feature provided by macOS. Now, here is one of their search engines that they're imposing on you. We all know tikasearch.com, the premier search engine of no one. And, and as we can see in the bottom, it is you know, the pride and joy of my home country, Babylon Limited, a great company that produces adware ever since the 90s. And also, unfortunate for a lot of people that are getting tattoos in different languages. There's a lot of, Babylon is an old translation software from way before Google Translate, so there are a lot of people out there that have photos of their like giant tattoos on their arms and backs, because Babylon used to be like a trial. There used to be a trial version of it, and then after the 30 days, every sentence you put into it, it will translate it to Babylon is the world's best translation program in the language that you're trying to translate. So there are a lot of people with tattoos on their backs in Hebrew and other languages that literally say Babylon is the world's best translation language. Seriously, Google it. But yeah, there are more payloads coming up, and yeah. So once Browser Enhancer is finished running, it will execute a post-install script that's conveniently called postinstall.sh. It will download yet another payload, and this time it's a binary executable called macver. Now, macver will be renamed to yet another randomly generated name, as I showed you before, using the same method of going to the dictionary and grabbing a random word. Then the new file will be called com.application.plist, and it will be created in your home directory library/preferences, and this file will contain the randomly generated name. The reason for that, and here, I'll just zoom in. Here it's called sailcloth, like that was the randomly generated name or word. Sorry, Jesus. The reason, one sip. The reason for that is they're always tracking themselves because they have a lot of watchdogs, and they plant themselves all over your system because, again, if something was removed, then they know where it was so that they could re-implement it again. Here's like one example. This is like one autorun sailcloth that looks for this plist file that holds some info. This plist file actually holds the ID of your machine and which hijacked search page to take you. So each time you're running a query in Google, for example, it will actually redirect you to loadingpages.info, blah blah blah, and there's like a JavaScript that hijacks your Google query and takes you to Tikasearch or one of those other search engines. And I'll show you in another slide, but basically the whole purpose of it is if you're going to Google or Amazon and you're searching for shoes, instead of getting like results from Google, you'll be forwarded to a different website, or you'll get a pop-up from some other website that works with them, and then they will give you whatever it is that you want or need or don't need, as I'll show you also. So let's break apart this lovely binary that's called macver. So macver is a 64-bit Mach-O executable. If you're not coming from the Mac world, Mach-O is the name of the binary executable format on the system. So just like Windows has a PE file, the portable executable format, and Linux has the ELF file, Mac has the Mach O format because it's Apple and they have to be different. And unlike all of their other executables that they used to develop and deploy before, this one actually doesn't have anything that's related to Qt. So that was a refreshing change. But, however, it had a lot of many other interesting things. So if we're looking at the string section, we can see a very, very strong method of encryption that's called base64 that they're using to hide from AV vendors and assholes like me. And as we all know, and I'm going to give you a pro tip because, you know, I'm ex-Israeli intelligence and I'm like, you know, I'm good at what I do. If you want to encrypt something and you don't want anyone to look into it and you want a very, very secure way to make something secret, please use base64. This is a pro tip. So after I debase64 all of those strings, I saw something really cool, and I saw a lot of AppleScript code. I just explained what AppleScript is. So basically, as I said, it's code injection as a service. So yo, dog, I heard you like code injection, so we used AppleScript to inject code that inject JavaScript into your browser. So let's look at that for a second. So if we deobfuscate all of the base64 crap that was in that section, which is exactly what this file is doing, we can see the following AppleScript code. Now, as you can see here, hey, hello! This checks if Safari is actually running, and if it is, it's English. Like, you don't have to be a reverse engineer to understand it. Tell application Safari to set page source to do JavaScript, and then it just plants a bunch of JavaScript in your browser. And this will be, this JavaScript that tracks you and plants cookies and looks at your browsing history and everything will be injected to your browser every second. So every second there is a loop that sends all of this garbage into your browser. So it's actually creating a hidden div section in every page that you're looking at with this JavaScript code. So this is one example for Safari. This is the same thing only for Chrome, and there's also one for Firefox, and of course Microsoft Internet Explorer. But as you can see, JavaScript that hijacks your shit, injecting code into your browser, no root privileges, no create remote thread, no allocating memory, just using features that are implemented by Apple for your own convenience in macOS. And this is actually kind of funny because 2 years ago what they did is they actually downloaded an entire proxy server that was running on your machine, and they hijacked through the system's firewall all of your traffic and plant shit in your pages through the firewall. Awesome. And I remember tweeting, I tweeted something like, why doing that? You just use AppleScript. There you go. So what's actually happening is that binary that's called macver is executing OSAScript, and every second there's an AppleScript that I just showed you that asks the browser, hey, what is the current URL that you are in right now? The browser will send that back to the OSAScript interpreter. The OSAScript say, oh, okay, you're in that website, here's some JavaScript for you. So this is basically what's going on every second, and this is how they're injecting code. Yeah, I just said that, so the HTTP server, blah, 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 I just said that. There's no need to repeat that. Now, another awesome thing, because again, like they're OPSEC masters, macver has debug output by default, because they never expected some asshole like me to look into it, because it's adware. So here's what happened. Like, I just executed macver in a terminal. That's all I did. I didn't do anything crazy. I just executed it. And I went to Google in my browser, and I just typed error. So if we'll zoom in here, we can see that the URL, here it is, google.com/search, blah, 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 blah. And here's the keyword that I put into Google. Then, remember that loading pages.info thing I showed you before? So then the AppleScript hijacks the browser. Just a second. Fuck me sideways. It hijacks the page that you're visiting. It then sends you to loadingpages.info/jo blah blah blah. Sends your machine's unique ID to them, so they will know which computer is is Googling or whatever. So because they need to tailor ads especially for you. And then their server, like there's a bidding war, an ad bidding war on their end, and then whoever wins the bidding war, the ad is being sent back to your browser. And here is the ad that you're being displayed, and then it will just send back to Google Chrome. Like that's what they're doing. In that case, and this is literally happened 3 days ago. So in that case, I googled error, and it sent back an ad for a fake AV that's called MacKeeper. Any of you know MacKeeper? Oh, yeah. Awesome. So this one's for you, Mr. Journalist. So what? Hold on. 3 days ago, I was giving this talk in Virus Bulletin in Canada. One of the reasons I'm so tired, because getting from Montreal, Canada to Louisville, Kentucky is very easy. And I gave this talk, and I said, just let me do this. Here's an error, and then a pop-up, clean your Mac, and then an ad for MacKeeper. Like, that's what happened. So I give this talk, and I finish it, and I get off stage, and I take my stuff. And those two people just approach me, the bottom of the stage. And they're like, hi, nice to meet you. We are this name, and we work for MacKeeper. And I'm like, fuck. And I tell them, should I give you our attorney's email? Like, how are you going to do that? And they go, no. We just wanted to shake your hand and thank you. And I look at them and start like, what the fuck is going on? And I'm shaking their hand, and they were like, no, we want to reform ourselves, and we don't know how we keep getting affiliated with this sort of crap. And I'm like, well, you are paying them to advertise you. Like, this is how it happens. I just explained that. And they go, yeah, but I want to tell you, ever since a few months ago, and we watched a bunch of your talks and read your papers, we cut all ties with Targeting Edge and maybe some other companies that are doing this crap. And we are reformed, and we want to be good to the community and the industry and blah, blah, blah. And they actually were one of the sponsors of Virus Bulletin in Canada. And I told them, hey guys, this is awesome. And I said these words, this is one of the coolest and weirdest and most awkward moments in my entire career, but this is awesome. And I said, hey, I'm happy that you want to do this. The burden of proof is solely on you. So if you, I won't tell anyone that you're all good now, because I need to see proof for that. But that was really fucking strange. And they said, again, thank you, shook my hand, thanked me for my work. And I'm like, I just took a giant crap on you on stage, but hey. Really weird. And every time I give this talk, something weird happens. Got it. So as I said in previous episodes of this talk, Targeting Edge actually dropped a payload on your machine, and in this payload, it was a tar.gz file, and in the tar.gz file, so what happened is I was too lazy to start a VM and put the file there and extract it, because it's a lot of work and I'm fucking lazy. So I said, instead of extracting the file in a VM, I'll just list what's inside it. And because the fact that the tar.gz is a POSIX format, it saves the original permission table inside the archive. So if you created a file on your machine, if I will list that file on my machine, I will see your username in the file. And their username was their full name, as I said before, and that's how I found them on LinkedIn. So now it says Batman. As I mentioned before, this is a better screenshot. But as I said, they kept insisting that, hey, that they have nothing to do with OSX Spirit. And I said, you're trying to distance yourself from it. And they said in their letter, we're not. We have nothing to do with it. You have no proof. You're full of shit. But I know them really well, because I've been dealing with that crap for 2 years, just for shits and giggles. And they kept insisting that they have nothing to do with it. And they kept saying that I don't have any proof. But what I have is code that looks almost exactly identical to the code from 2 years ago. Their methods, their scripts, their payloads, the way that they write their code is exactly the same. And also there's frantic letters coming every day. They're saying that they have nothing to do with this. But this is all cool, but what is proof, right? Because this is kind of speculative, and they can say a lot of stuff, they can say this is not proof. So let's look at what is proof. So when I looked at all of their domains, I noticed that they have tons of domains, and they register their domains in batches of 10 or 12. And they pay the extra $10 per domain for the domain privacy. But there was one batch where they just forgot to do it. And that batch was related to other domains and other IP addresses. So when you look at it, at the relation between them, you can see that this domain that connects to other IP addresses that are allegedly have nothing to do with them, you can see that it's registered by the CEO of the company. But wait! So if you're, oh yeah, this is crap. But yeah, this is who is Targeting Edge. This is the email and their name of the CEO of the company, who now runs a blockchain advertising company as well. But also, in January, I got a resume from a dude. This dude was the developer that I found his name in one of the files. And this guy said that he was a software developer at Targeting Edge, and his work appeared in the very report that I wrote. So what is proof, right? Fuck me. Now, they also said that they're not using any exploits, but he said that his work also appeared in this article, in this news site article. So if you go to that article, you see this. Unbelievable. Yeah. So I really don't have anything else to say. So this concludes my talk, and I just want to wrap things up with this. The fact that I got all of those threat letters and all of this frantic behavior and all of this bullshit meant to me that I was actually doing my job and I was barking at the wrong tree. So what I want to tell all of you is, if you're doing some work like this, some security research, some malware analysis or whatever, and you believe that you are right and you start to get frantic letters and you have proof, work with your company's legal department, work with your company to get all the truth out there. Because when this started happening, my CEO saw those emails and I asked him, like, what do we do? Like, do I stop working on this? Because we already have proof and we already started like fucking around with them. And he said, no, they're threatening us. Fuck them. So learn how to work with your legal department. As researchers, sometimes legal department is the hesitant department that says, hey, I don't want to deal with that. That's a lot of red tape. Insist on that. Luckily enough, our legal department are awesome and they're great people, and I could not have done this without them. So I again thank them, and thank you really so much for coming and attending. This means a lot to me, and I'm really humbled by the fact that all of you were here, sitting down and listening to me swearing for like 45 minutes. I have like 5 minutes for questions, right? So if any of you have questions, now is the time. Yes, the question was if I ever saw any samples that were targeting Windows. So actually, yes, the original Pirate is for Windows. It's called W32 Pirate. I didn't find it, I didn't name it. The only reason why this is called OSX Pirate is because I found that it's related to the Windows variant. Any other questions? Every fucking time. The question was if I ever interviewed that guy. Absolutely not. And I checked like a few months ago, and he works for another security startup. And I looked at his Facebook page, and the cover photo says, "To think like a hacker." No, to catch a hacker, you need to think like a hacker. Okay. Any other questions? Yeah. Is that in the? So the question was if the plist file, and there were several of them, were they always in the same place? So yes, they're in the same place, along with other system-related plist files, but they're always named different because of the name generation. So any other questions? Awesome. Guys, seriously, thank all of you so much. I am really humbled, and this is awesome. Thank you.